For you, what's the most important thing when you buy a phone? The size of the screen, the CPU, the amount of memory, the storage, the camera, the brand, or the color? Depending on your use, you may prefer one over the other. But when you look at any flagship device, at least in Android, everyone wants to make you fall in love with the idea of more megapixels or something weird like AI. But there is a common factor in all those models: the Snapdragon 8 Gen 1. And it's easy to think that they all have the same performance. So, after so many news saying that Samsung is limiting the performance of the S22, an avalanche created by the lack of knowledge from the supposed specialists inside the media. Make no mistake, all phones limit their performance in one way or another. Let's understand why in this comparison between the Redmagic 7 and the S22 Ultra. Welcome back, I'm Claudio and this is Zero to Tech. If you look at most game consoles and most PCs, usually most of the real weight resides in only one thing: the cooling solution. If we try to keep both our consoles and PCs as cool as we can, why don't we do the same thing with our phones? And since these two phones include the new Snapdragon 8 Gen 1, but with completely different philosophies, it's a great way to learn something: how cooling really affects performance on these new phones. The Galaxy S22 Ultra followed the trend of the big brands to include the bare minimum in the box. You only got the phone, in this case in wine red or burgundy according to Samsung, a SIM tray pin, a USB-C cable, and nothing else. The Redmagic has the tendency to include first a 65-watt charger and a TPU case for the phone. It might seem like a simple gift, but in this case it's fundamental for the thermal design, as we will see in the test. When it comes to design, they are very different. Both have things in common, like the power and volume buttons, a bottom speaker and a front speaker for calls that doubles as a stereo speaker, and multiple microphones to improve the recording quality. But at a first glance, they are clearly aimed at different markets. The S22 Ultra has a sober design. It even leaves the curved corners like its little brothers, for a squarer shape like the previous Note line. The sides with a very clean design. Even the pen hides like an additional button. On the back, we have the same color with a matte texture, only interrupted by the cameras. Very sober, not flashy at all. It's IP68 certified, so you can submerge it in water for a short time. All this is the opposite of the Redmagic 7. This Pulsar version combines blues, purples, and pinks on an almost chromatic surface, even adding LED lights in two bars and in the logo, and with ventilation holes on both sides and in the back, to provide air for the active cooling system, something we rarely see on phones. So yes, be careful not to let any water get into it. It also has two shoulder touch buttons for games, and a switch with a red hue to activate the gaming mode. Another big plus with this Redmagic 7 is that it includes a standard headphone jack. Both have screens the same size, 6.8 inches, both OLED, although with different resolutions and refresh rates. The Redmagic one has 4 modes: 60, 90, 120 and 165 Hz, all fixed, and the Samsung variable up to 160 Hz or 60 fixed. Both phones supports HDR, the Redmagic with a maximum brightness of 700 nits, and the Samsung S22 Ultra with an incredible 1750 nits, which sounds like a very big plus in favor of the S22, but in reality it's hard to notice much difference. The Galaxy does look brighter, yes, but only if you look them side by side. And although they are the same size, the size of the phones is very different. Samsung take the screen almost to the edge, with curved sides and a punch hole type camera, while the Redmagic doesn't follow the trends with larger top and bottom borders, where the camera and sensors are hidden, so the picture of the screen remains clean of holes. But it's so big it doesn't fit on controllers like the original Razer Kishi and the GameSteer X2. When it comes to specs, they both use the Snapdragon 8 Gen 1. Both have 256GB of UFS 3.1 storage, and both use Gorilla Glass, just in different versions. The main difference are that the S22 Ultra has 12GB of RAM and the Redmagic 16, but the S22 has a 5000 mAh battery, which give it more or less 108 hours in tests, and the Redmagic has a 4500 mAh one, with an average duration of 89 hours. None have a place for microSD expansion, but we now expect that from flagship phones. Okay, now let's see why I think the media made a storm in a glass. We have two phones with the same CPU. That means that, on paper, both have the potential to have the same performance. The problem is that, like any current CPU, more performance equals more gigahertz, which means more voltage, which means more temp. And, as we will see, it is not such an easy problem to deal with. With every phone, designers must find the balance between temperature and performance. And the easiest way to do this is by limiting the performance of the processor, which it will also do it by itself. This is a very common practice on laptops, where the manufacturer usually states the TDP, or thermal design, in watts, which basically tells us how capable the laptop is to dissipate heat. But it's not a common practice on phones, and there is no better way to see it than benchmarks. Starting with Geekbench, where we can see that at first, they seem to be in the same ballpark, with an almost identical single core result, but we can see that the multi-core results begin to separate. And even if we run Wildlife Extreme, which is a 100% GPU test, we see that, although there is a difference, it's not that big. On Antutu, there is a 10,000 point difference between both phones. This test lasts a little longer, which gives us an indication of where the difference may lie, especially considering that all the tests were done with a cold CPU. So let's run the stress test with Wildlife Extreme. It runs the same test we saw, but 20 times in a row. And this is where the thermal design starts to show. In the Redmagic 7, the slowest execution is within 91% of the fastest. With the S22, the difference is just 47%. That means the last run scored half the points the first one did. And if we look at the temp graph, we can see that while the S22 tries to stall the temperature at 40 degrees Celsius, the Redmagic has no problem letting the heat rise. It doesn't even reach the thermal balance point during the test. That means you could continue to run the tests and the CPU will get even hotter. So, is Samsung designing the phone wrong? No, but it's the choice they made. While the Redmagic can let the processor continue to heat up, because it can dissipate it with the fan, Samsung and most phones must limit their speed much sooner. If we look at the phones with the thermal camera at the end of the test, we see that the S22 barely reaches 40 degrees, while the Redmagic had its hottest point at almost 60 degrees. Just for reference, you can get burned touching something 49 degrees hot for more than 8 minutes. The Redmagic literally can burn your skin. That's why the case is part of the thermal design. It's made to keep your skin away from the heat, while the Samsung can be held without the fear of hurting yourself. These are decisions that both teams made in the design, but it doesn't mean that the Samsung S22 Ultra is slow. It's faster than 98% of the Android devices in circulation, just not as stable. And if you consider that 99% of people cannot distinguish the difference in speed between a new low-end phone and a high-end, it's easy to understand that flagship phones are overpowered. And 99% of people will never use an app that pushes the CPU or GPU to the max. Even those kind of power-hungry applications, such as video editing, image editing, CAD design, and 3D design, are rarely seen on phones. The only common ones are games. Samsung knows that, also that slowing down apps that don't need as much power doesn't affect the bottom line for the user, but it will make the phone last longer, have a better battery life, and make the overall experience more balanced. Perhaps the right thing is to include an app to control the performance by app. But to decide between getting the phone out or deleting it to make sure that only the people who test are going to use, make no mistake, even I as a client prefer to have the phone sooner. Now let's go to the best part of the video. Let's see how they perform in games. We start testing with Call of Duty Mobile, which is a very optimized game. It runs almost on any device. With this too, we can raise the graphic options and the frame rate to the max, without any problem, but none of the two are enabled for 120 frames. I played about half an hour with each one and never had any performance dips. Then, to try something harder, we went with Fortnite. It's not as popular on Android anymore because it's no longer on the Play Store. And here, we begin to see important differences. I set the game to max quality and increased the maximum FPS to 60. The S22 Ultra starts at 60, but after a while it balances out about 45 frames. Even slower the more you play. Within 20 minutes, it's almost unplayable. The Redmagic doesn't slow down though. The minimum I got was 58 FPS. Now with Genshin Impact. Also with the settings to the max, the Redmagic has absolutely no problem. It holds the max framerate all the time, no matter if you're in the forest or in the city. But the S22 barely held up. While in the outskirts it had an average of 50 frames, but inside the city it can hardly hold 45, and after 20 minutes, don't expect more than 30 FPS. And now, let's check some emulation. I only checked the heavy ones so the video wouldn't be so long. PlayStation 2, GameCube and Wii. As far as the GameCube and Wii are concerned, I used Dolphin MMJR. And neither of the two phones will have problem playing any GameCube game that works on the emulator. Same with the Wii game. We also tried upscaling Mario Sunshine resolution, and both phones go up to 6x with no issues. Testing with Automodelista, which is a harder one to run, the Redmagic has no problem playing at 4x, but the S22 Ultra barely stayed at 3x, even worse after a while. The situation with Aether SX2 is similar. I like testing God of War 2 because it has a stable framerate in the first section, which makes it easier to compare the results. The Redmagic can go up to 5x and keep the framerate, but the Galaxy at 5x is unplayable. I know in both cases these resolutions are much more than the screens. I think 3x for these two consoles is the sweet spot, and there both run perfect. Now to finish, let's review the cameras and other additional features, because we don't use our phones just for games. Let's talk about the game modes first. The Redmagic has a mode activated by the external switch. It puts the phone in a console-like mode, with an interface focused on games, and it keeps track of how much time you spent playing. The Galaxy S22 Ultra has the game launcher, which basically groups the games and their notifications on the same screen. You can even hide them from the rest of the screens. It doesn't add too much, but it also allows you to block notifications while you're playing. During the game, both have additional interfaces. The Redmagic one gives you a ton of options, from modifying the volume and brightness to changing the performance mode on the fly, including the activation of plugins, and allows you to configure the shoulder buttons. The one on the Galaxy allows you to disable notifications with priority mode. But the main thing is that it allows you to change Game Boost, which lets you manage the performance settings per game. This was necessary for the games to run at full performance. The only problem is that it only shows you the game that it detects, which is absurd because they don't have a list of all the existing games. As an example, it didn't detect Dolphin MMJR and Citra MMJ. We also tried the ability to connect the phone to an external display. Both support MHL on their USB ports, which means you can connect a USB-C monitor or a USB-C to HDMI adapter and see it on a big screen, with almost no latency. The Redmagic only shows the same as the screen on the phone. It doesn't have any kind of desktop mode like Galaxy's Text mode, which changes the interface to a Windows type, in which you can change the resolution and see the games at full screen. About the cameras, there is not much to compare. The Galaxy S22 Ultra is the king of the hill, with its 4 cameras. The main one, wide with a 108 megapixel sensor, a 12 megapixel ultra wide, and 2 10 megapixel telephoto lens, one with 3x optical zoom and the second one with a 10x optical zoom. The photos and video taken by the S22 Ultra compete against any phone. They have one of the best post-processing systems, effects, and night vision, and the 2 optical zoom lenses are useful for many situations. And this is one of the Redmagic's 7 weakest points. It has 3 cameras, the main wide with a 64 megapixel sensor, an ultra wide with 8 megapixel, and the last one a 2 megapixel macro lens. No current phone camera is bad, and the casual photographer will not find much difference between the two. But if you're more of an expert or a content creator, the S22 Ultra is clearly the best option. In relation to the software, both come with Android 12. The Samsung with the One UI interface, which is, well, you know, One UI, well known to anyone who has owned a Samsung phone. And in all the tests, it did not give us any problem. You might feel it sometimes slowed down, but it has more to do with the variable refresh rate of the screen. The Redmagic interface is called Redmagic UI, and it's much simpler, almost like a clean Android experience, which is more than enough for any user. It also didn't give us any problems in the tests. Regarding support, Samsung promises 4 years of Android updates and 5 years of security updates, while Redmagic, let's just say not. From experience, if you receive an Android update, consider yourself lucky. There are security and bug fixes updates, just don't expect a completely new version. As a last detail, the Galaxy S22 Ultra has the S Pen that adds many features, from being able to take notes without unlocking the phone, to using it as a remote button to take photos. It has a fairly robust ecosystem with many apps that can use it, and it's an accessory that creative types will surely enjoy. Finally, we have the main difference between these two phones: the price. The Redmagic starts at $630, while the S22 Ultra starts at $1,200. Although, the Redmagic will cost you a little more from delivery and duties, depending on where you live. To close, the S22 Ultra fills any checklist of features and requirements. And yes, it does slow down the performance in some apps, but thanks to this video, you now know that the only way not to throttle is with a phone like the Redmagic 7. So don't get caught up in the avalanche of misinformation. If it had been Xiaomi or Huawei, I'm sure no one would have said anything. But whether it is Apple, Samsung or Google, someone is going to complain. Or what do you think? Leave your opinion in a comment, and if you're already there, do not forget to like and subscribe. Remember, retro games, modern technology, zero to tech.